This is Wickett on Wisconsin. My name's Mike Wickett. After 10 years in Milwaukee talking sports, I took a bit of a break, but now I'm back and here to talk about the Packers, the Bucks, the Brewers, and more with you. And now inside the Koss Headphone Studios, this is Wickett on Wisconsin with me, Mike Wickett. All right, so admittedly, it's been a bit since I have had a chance to get on the microphone and do one of these podcasts, and I'm glad to be back and doing it. It's been tough to get on here because there's so many things I want to talk about, but every single day I still think about that NFC Championship game. The last podcast I did was called Closure, and I promise you that was going to be my last podcast about the Packers and the NFC title game and whatnot, and that's I'm going to hold that to be true. So coming up, I am going to get to the Milwaukee Bucks, because now that we're done with the Packers taking up most of the podcasts, and as we watch Giannis and company try to push towards the postseason, it's going to be an interesting ride to get there, and some observations on the Bucks as they get more attention from the sports fans in Wisconsin. And also, we have to get to the Green Bay Packers, but not talking about the NFC title game. And I don't know if you watched the Super Bowl. I assume you watched the Super Bowl. Man, I have to think that Green Bay would have had maybe not a 31-9 dominant effort, but their pass rush was so good with Zadarius Smith and Rashawn Gary. I don't know if they get to Mahomes the way that Tampa Bay got to Mahomes, but I feel like they would have rattled Mahomes, and I think Green Bay wins that Super Bowl. And I was as shocked as anybody that Tampa Bay wound up winning that football game, especially in the fashion that they did. I mean, it was 31-9 after 3 quarters. That ball game was over midway through the third quarter, and it really made you think as a Packers fan, like, had they won that NFC title game, what would have happened in the Super Bowl? But it didn't happen. And so ever since that loss, it's been, the conversation has shifted to what is Green Bay going to do in the offseason? What is Green Bay going to do in the draft and free agency? And you can make all the jokes that you want. And I understand that people are going to say, well, they'll probably draft a quarterback in the first round. And I saw one jokester say that Green Bay is going to have to draft a quarterback so they can have someone to back up Jordan Love, because you don't have a quarterback until you need. Man, I don't know what they're going to do in that first round. I do know there are some places Green Bay must improve on this roster if they are going to get Aaron to a Super Bowl, if Aaron's going to get this team to a Super Bowl, because that's what next year is really going to be all about, because in 2022, that's when the real conversation comes in, because Aaron's contract becomes much more cuttable, if that's the word, and that's realistically when a Jordan Love era can actually begin. I don't want that to happen sooner rather than it has to happen. I want Aaron Rodgers to play at a high enough level where Green Bay wants to keep him as much as anybody. You saw his MVP years, third MVP of the season. You assume that coming up next year in year 3 under Matt LaFleur, the offense is going to perform quite similar. I would think that Devontae is going to be just fine. I would think that Allen Lazard takes that next step. I don't know what the third wide receiver is going to look like. I don't know how much faith they're still going to have in MVS. I mean, the guy led the league in yards per catch and also led the league in drop rate. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do at the wide receiver spot. I mean, I think I did a whole bit about this in the last podcast about it, but one spot they are going to have to upgrade at, and I think you would agree, is at that second cornerback spot. Defensively, that was one of the weaknesses on this team. I mean, you saw what Kevin King did in the NFC title game. Listen, Kevin King is as hot and cold a player as there is in the NFL. When he's hot, he makes plays. When he's not, he's the NFC title game version of Kevin King. Mistiming jumps against Mike Evans. He let Scotty Miller get behind him. Now, a lot of that was on former defensive coordinator Mike Pettin. Another move that surprised me, and I'll talk about here in just a sec about what to expect out of Joe Brady. But they're going to move on from Kevin King. They just are. And whether or not they take a corner in the first round, or there's some interesting names that are out there in free agency. And I don't know how they're going to get money for free agents. I just know this about the salary cap. If you want somebody and they want you, guess what? You can make things happen with the salary cap. It's how Kansas City got so many great deals done with their guys and their setup and pretty good financials for the next few years. If Green Bay wants somebody and that player wants to play for Green Bay, it can happen. You can massage a salary cap. Patrick Peterson is a name that is out there. Is he as good as he was 2 years ago, 3 years ago? I don't think so. This year, he had his second high. He tied his second high career interception total for the Arizona Cardinals. Boy, how would that secondary look? Savage and Amos on the back line, Jair Alexander on one side, and Patrick Peterson, who doesn't have to be the number one DB. Patrick Peterson on the other side. Or how about A.J. Bouier, who was on the Jaguars, then was on the Broncos, got cut by the Broncos or released by the Broncos a couple of days ago. He had an injury issue, but in the back end of the season, reading some reports from Broncos insiders, Bouier played at his all-pro level, his Pro Bowl level, the back end of the season, including against the Chargers, who have all those offensive weapons and Herbert slinging the ball around. So those are two names that would look really, really good opposite Jair Alexander if the Packers can figure out a way to come up with dollars in the offseason. I'm not a capologist. I don't know how it works. Can guys rework their deals? Can Aaron Rodgers get more later if he defers some money now to free up space in the cap? But I know I saw some people saying that's a nightmare. Listen, I am willing, as much as I'm a fan of the Jordan Love pick because it's a long-term pick, because in 3 years, if and when Aaron Rodgers moves on, we're looking at this and saying, well, we got this kid in the system. He's got all the talent in the world. Let's move on to Jordan Love. What a smart pick it was by Goot, back in 2020. I'm willing to make the opposite, to sacrifice for a trip to the Super Bowl in the 2021-2022 season. I'm okay if the Packers have some real financial issues a year or two from now, if it frees them up to make one last run or one run with, Aaron here before whatever happens in 2022. I'm okay with that. And I'm not a capologist. I don't know how this stuff works. I'm just a guy with a microphone who's a fan just like you are, hoping to see Green Bay get the opportunity to make some kind of move that will put them over the top and not in the NFC title game watching somebody else play in the Super Bowl a year from now. And somebody said, and I was thinking about this too, if the salary cap is going to drop to $180 million because of what COVID did, and the Packers are going to be without a lot of cap room, I feel like there's a lot of teams that are going to be without a lot of cap room. And I also feel like that's bad for the free agents. I mean, think about this. If there are 5 DBs and 3 teams need those DBs, some of them are going to get great contracts, right? Well, some of those other guys are going to have to come in below what their normal market value would be. In fact, all of them might have to come in below what their normal market value would be because the salary cap is going to drop. Everybody else has to drop with it. It's not like, okay, the cap's at 180, but we can go into the luxury tax. That's not a thing in the National Football League. You can't go into a luxury tax and pay like you can in the NBA. So I think with some structuring, some finagling, some massaging of the salary cap, I think the Green Bay Packers can find a way to add that defensive player that they need. Whether it's a defensive back, like a Peterson or an A.J. Bouier, or an inside linebacker. Now, for a while, the inside linebacker spot for your Green Bay Packers hasn't really been a thing, all right? They haven't cared about the inside linebacker spot. And that has to do mostly with Mike Pettin, the defensive coordinator, whose scheme is a lot of dime, a lot of umbrella, a lot of pressure from the edges. Now, they did sign Christian Kirksey after Blake Martinez was gone. They did make that move, and Kirksey had mixed results. And they got some young guys I think that you are probably a fan of. Kamal Martin, Chris Barnes, guys back there that are interesting to see where they go down the road. But Pettin's scheme attacked from the outside. And that's why Zadarius Smith, and for the first year and the last month of Preston Smith, you saw a lot of productivity out of this Smith brothers. And then you saw Rashawn Gary, who they drafted within Mike Pettin's system to attack from the outside. I would say that right now, between Zadarius Smith and Rashawn Gary, I've got my edge rushers. I don't know what you think about Preston Smith. Sometimes I think Preston Smith is worthless, and then he has a great December, and you're like, okay, maybe we need to keep Preston Smith around. I have no idea. And the biggest change the Packers made this offseason so far, I mean, this is still the beginning of February. The biggest change that they have made so far here in February is they let Mike Pettine go. I, for one, was very surprised by the fact that they let Mike Pettine go. That shocked me. I thought, and there are two schools of thought here. I thought they were going to keep Mike Pettine around because at the end of the day, at the end of the year, the end of the regular season, this was a top 10 defense. They weren't great, but statistically, and maybe it was the opponents they were playing, but statistically, Mike Pettine at the end of the year can say, well, I left Green Bay with a top 10 defense, and they fired me. You could feel it was going to happen. I'm still shocked that it actually did, but you could feel LaFleur was upset with Pettine after week 6. And that was the game against Tampa the first time around when they literally kicked the Packers behind up and down the field. Like you could feel, you could sense that when teams had these monster games against Green Bay, rightfully so, Matt LaFleur wasn't terribly thrilled with the effort he was getting out of his defense and the pressure that people were putting on him about his defense, and that's Mike Pettine's problem. So at the end of the year, when in the first half they had nothing in the NFC Championship game to stop Tom Brady. Now, they did force Brady into 3 turnovers in that second half, but really, you go back to the field goal decision by Matt LaFleur, and I know I said I wasn't going to talk about the NFC title game, and I'm not here to break down the NFC title game, but you go down to that play, and you think about that play, he banked on his defense coming up with another stop. I mean, he got 3 in the second half out of Brady. And when he called upon his defense to get him the football back, whether you like that decision or not, that's what the decision was. I'm going to kick 3. My defense has been playing well. Pettine's going to be able to dial something up. And I think Mike Pettine lost his job on the first play after the field goal when Mike Evans caught the ball on first down for 9 yards. At that moment, right after the 2-minute warning, at that moment, you're like, they're not going to have enough to stop him. And then we know what happened with Kevin King over the middle and the questionable, it was a holding call, but it wasn't a holding call in the first quarter or second quarter, but it was in the fourth quarter. Bitter, not bitter. But I think at that moment, you could sense that Matt LaFleur was like, man, I took the ball out of the MVP's hand. And I gave it to you, Mike Pettine, and I put it up on you, and I put on you and your half of the team and your guys and what you're going to dial up, and I'm going to trust, because I'm going to be the one that has to answer all those questions. I'm going to trust you, Pettine. And his defense couldn't come up with a big stop when they needed it against the GOAT. I think that's when he lost his job. I think that was the final nail in the coffin for Mike Pettine. But you could tell all year when teams would have big days against Green Bay, in questionable situations, questionable lineups, questionable defensive schemes. Matt LaFleur probably got sick of answering those questions and finally, made the change to Joe Brady. A lot of hate for Joe Brady. Joe Brady was the defensive coordinator of the winless Lions team a decade and a half ago. Joe Brady is the defensive coordinator for the Washington football team, bottom 5 defense. I will say this. Now, I'm not one to jump all over any hiring the day it's made. All right? I've been wrong a lot when I've done that. I have learned from my mistakes. I'm going to wait and see on Joe Brady. I'm not going to wait and see for week 1. I'm not going to wait and see for the first week of October. By about midway through this next season, it'll be very interesting to see where the Packers' defense is. Are they still, God, I hope not, rushing 3 and dropping 8 all the time? I hope not. When I was in Kansas City following the Chiefs, they hired Steve Spagnuolo as their defensive coordinator in 2019. and they got rid of Bob Sutton. Bob Sutton took as much flack as Dom Capers or Mike Pettin down there as Packers fans give. He was the issue in everybody's mind. They were not aggressive. The scheme was terrible. They were always bottom 5 defense. Now, the first year Spags got to Kansas City, they also brought in Tyrann Mathieu, and they traded for Frank Clark. Okay, those guys are pretty dang good at what they do. Those guys come in. The defense that first 4 or 5 weeks was terrible. It was as bad as Sutton's. But by about week 6, by about week 7, by about week 8, the Chiefs' defense became really good. And they became a top half of the NFL in defense. And then you throw in Mahomes, and they wind up going to the Super Bowl, and they win, and they beat the San Francisco 49ers, and we all know what's up. And then they ride it again. They run it back, and they get back to the Super Bowl again. Unable to finish the job. They couldn't get to Brady, yada, yada, yada. But my point is this. Don't judge Joe Brady based on what happened with the Detroit Lions and the Washington football team. Don't judge Joe Brady and this Packers defense on week 1 or week 2 or week 3. You can start, I believe, to judge Joe Brady's defense if you want, for good or bad, and I'm not going to, until we get to about week 8, week 9, till the calendar flips to November, which seems like forever from now. And I know that's hard to do. I know that Twitter and Facebook and, this podcast and fandom and everywhere else, people want to yell and scream about coordinators. I mean, fire Dom, fire Pettin, fire this, fire that. Wait. Be patient. Defenses are very difficult to flip, all right? I imagine there's not going to be a ton of change in the scheme, except from everything I have read, everything I've heard, everything I've been told about Joe Brady, it's going to be more aggressive. 2 sides to that coin. 1 probably means more pressure on the quarterback, probably means more Jair on an island and whoever else that second corner is. God help us if it's Kevin King. It can't be. Maybe it's Peterson, maybe it's Bouier, whoever. But that's going to mean more pressure, more aggressive, less rush 3, drop 8. You're going to actually see this thing called a blitz. Now, Packers fans, you may not know much about blitzing because you don't ever see it from your own defense. Aaron Rodgers saw it a lot. Patrick Mahomes saw a little bit of it. They actually didn't even need all that much. But Tampa was able to get home because that offensive line was so banged up. But you don't see very much from your own defense when it comes to blitzing. But you will. I believe you will. And as far as Brady's tenure in Detroit and Washington, look, up until this year, the Washington football team has been an absolute joke. Since the Mark Rippon, Art Monk days. Okay, you want to go back to Darryl Green and company, back in the 90s. The Washington football team has been a disaster. They're just throwing anything they can against the wall. They're hiring this coach. Up until now, I think Ron Rivera has things figured out. So whatever Joe Brady was doing with that defense, that dysfunctional organization, that dysfunctional locker room, don't let that deter you from what can happen when you get to an organization that has some cohesion, that has unity, that has guys in the locker room, for the most part, all on the same page. Don't judge Joe Brady on what he did with the Detroit Lions in 2000 whatever. All right? The Lions are a joke. Maybe this new regime, and this new regime actually, you should take serious in the NFC North. I think what they have done behind the scenes with the guys they have hired it's been really, really good. And they moved Stafford out and brought in all kinds of picks. They got Goff as a stopgap. Who knows what's going to happen there? Their head coach seems like a nut, but we'll find out. But don't judge Joe Brady based on what happened with the Lions in 2007. I mean, that's not really fair to this Joe Brady coming in with this team. I guarantee you this. When Matt LaFleur was figuring out who he wanted as his defensive coordinator, he knows what Joe Brady did in Detroit. He knows what Joe Brady did in Washington. All right? He also knows what Joe Brady did in L.A. with the Rams, because that's where he worked with them. Now, granted, they had Aaron Donald. Packers don't exactly have an Aaron Donald. Be cool if they did. It'd be great if there was an Aaron Donald just waiting in the draft for the Packers to select, or somebody who wants to come to Green Bay and be an absolute beast. But Matt LaFleur knows more about Joe Brady than I do. Matt LaFleur knows more about Joe Brady than you do. Matt LaFleur knows more about Joe Brady than pretty much anybody, I'm assuming, because that's a guy he worked with. I've never worked with Joe Brady. You've never worked with Joe Brady. You've just used Joe Brady's 2007 Lions and the Washington team from a couple of years ago as, well, look what happened there. Don't forget, all of the critics, the Stephen A. Smiths of the world and the Colin Cowherds of the world and everybody who's looking at what the Green Bay Packers did 2 years ago when they let Mike McCarthy go, and they found some guy in Tennessee whose offense was 27th in the National Football League. That worked out okay, right? I mean, you got to be pretty happy with Matt LaFleur. Now he comes and inherits Aaron Rodgers, but the dude is having an incredible, historic start to his coaching career. And a lot of people criticized it because they didn't know anything about this guy because he was the offensive coordinator for a team that was 27th in the National Football League. Don't forget, Mike McCarthy's offenses in San Francisco when he was hired a decade ago, they weren't exactly lighting a league on fire in San Francisco. So see what happens. Be patient. The offseason is going to be interesting. I don't know what they're going to do at the draft spot. I don't know if that's where you find your corner. I know they need a corner. They need an inside linebacker probably. They probably need an offensive tackle because David Bakhtiari likely won't be ready for the start of the season, and that right tackle spot's going to need some work too. So there are some needs to fill for Green Bay. It'll be interesting to see what happens. And by the way, one more note on the Packers before I switch to the Bucks. How smart does that signing or that drafting of A.J. Dillon look right now? If that cap drops to 180, which it's probably going to happen, we already knew this, but say goodbye to Aaron Jones. I love Aaron Jones. One of the most fun guys to watch play in a Packers uniform. And for years, I was screaming about Mike McCarthy not getting him the football enough. I'm not 100% sure Matt LaFleur got him the football enough, but I digress. But A.J. Dillon, who's shown flashes that he can play in this league in his rookie year in the limited time he was given the ball, I think he had the highest broken tackle rate in the NFL. He and Nick Chubb were 1 and 2. That's an amazing stat for a rookie. But drafting Quadzilla is going to wind up looking like a really, really good pick. And I don't know if the Packers realized that there are going to be no fans and the cap was going to drop, or maybe they had inside information. I don't know. But I believe that is going to be a good, a really good pick when they don't sign Aaron Jones, because you don't pay running backs. You just don't pay running backs in the National Football League. You don't do it. I mean, Ronald Jones was a draft pick, and they paid Leonard Fournette nothing. There's your running attack for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Chiefs drafted Clyde Edwards-Helaire, and they traded for Le'Veon Bell, who is nothing. I mean, there's your prime example. Don't pay running backs. And as much as I love Aaron Jones, he's going to go get a big payday. I hope he gets that big payday. It's just not going to be with Green Bay. Can we get to the Bucks now? We really need to talk about the Milwaukee Bucks here for a second. And I don't have as much to say on the Bucks because I don't want to sound like a skipping record, okay? But if you're watching, listen. I think most people know a few things about the Bucks that are Milwaukee Bucks fans. And if you're listening to this podcast or you're watching the video, I think you're a Bucks fan and you know this right here. I put this on Twitter. All fans sitting at home know these to be true to beat the Bucks. Shoot threes. They won't defend. This is getting embarrassingly bad. It was something we knew going into the bubble last year. It was something we saw in the bubble last year. Everybody talked about this coming out of the bubble last year and this year, and yet still nothing has changed. Milwaukee's defensive scheme is terrible when it comes to defending the three. And as I've said before, the league has figured it out. If I'm sitting at home watching the game and I've got a couple of Miller Lights in me, and you're sitting at home watching the game, and you're drinking or eating or doing whatever you do during a Bucks game, and you know that if teams just keep the ball in the perimeter, Milwaukee will eventually sag in the paint and you'll find an open look. Teams are, I think I saw the quote, he said, if he's okay with teams having to have record-setting nights from the three, if that's what it takes to beat Milwaukee. Well, guess what, Giannis? Guess what, Coach Bud? Guess what, Milwaukee? Teams are doing it. I'm recording this on the 11th, on a Thursday. Last night, the Bucks lost in Phoenix. You know how their 16-point lead was evaporated? Because Phoenix got hot from outside. Every team in the National Basketball Association can shoot from the outside. Every team can get hot. Maybe not everybody, maybe everybody doesn't have a Steph Curry, but everybody can get hot. Devin Booker can get hot. It doesn't matter. The fact that the Bucks are giving up threes at this rate, in their losses, teams are shooting 45% from the three-point line against them. Figure that out. Like, something has to change. I don't know what that is. And last night, they didn't have Drew Holiday. They don't have Drew on this road trip because he's the COVID protocols. He's got to sit out. But my God, that is one of the things that every fan knows at home. If you want to beat the Bucks, shoot threes. You want to beat the Bucks? Let Giannis shoot threes. Everybody knows that. I heard, and forgive me if I got the woman's name wrong, I think it's Doris Burke, whoever was on the call last night, watching the game on the national broadcast, said that on average, Giannis Antetokounmpo is facing 8 feet of space between he and the defender when he's at the perimeter. 8 feet. He has got, you know why that is? Because teams are like, go ahead, Giannis, you shoot. We'll give you the three. I don't want to sound like a skipping record. If you want to know my thoughts on Giannis shooting threes, I've done several podcasts about it. I was on it all throughout the bubble. I hate three-point Giannis. I hate three-point Giannis. I like mean mugging, rack going, slam dunking, rebounding, shot blocking Giannis. That's the Giannis I like. The guy that runs the floor with the head of steam, the guy whose legs are so long it takes him 2 steps to get from the top of the three-point line to the basket, the Euro stepping Giannis, the guy who just looks like an octopus up there. That's the Giannis I like. I don't like three-point shooting Giannis. The NBA loves three-point shooting Giannis. And the NBA, just like you, knows that if Giannis shoots threes, take a step back. It's fine. He might hit one. The odds are he's going to hit one. But he's not hitting 4. He's not hitting 5. That's a dude you want shooting the 3. And the other thing is, wall Giannis. He can't do much else besides drive. And that was kind of obvious again last night. If you saw the end of the Phoenix game, and this podcast is not just inspired by the end of the Phoenix game, but I watched the game last night. And if you saw the end of the game, Bucks were down 1 with 2.5 seconds to go, inbounding the ball on the sideline. And props to Phoenix, props to their coaching staff for drawing up their defense, and props to Chris Paul for putting himself in the position. So you got Dante on the near side inbounding the ball. You got Chris Middleton in the corner, and then there's Bryn Forbes and Brook Lopez, and was it Bobby Portis? I can't remember. But regardless, you had Giannis in the backcourt, and that's where they forced the inbounds pass to go. And then Giannis catches the ball, not going to the basket, but going perpendicular to the basket towards the far elbow, and puts up a jump shot. Giannis can't shoot, and the league knows it. And when Devin Booker was asked about, what did you think when Giannis was forced into a jump shot, or the question was similar to that, he said, we were in good shape. And that's not a jerk comment. That is not a D-bag comment like, screw you, Devin Booker, for saying that. The league knows that if you can get Giannis going horizontal as opposed to perpendicular, if you can get Giannis going side to side as opposed to at the basket, you got a good shot at keeping Giannis from getting the ball in the hole. I got into a Twitter discussion with somebody, and you can follow me at Mike Wickett. I got into a Twitter discussion with somebody about this exact topic today. And it was, who do you want taking that shot? I want anybody but Giannis Antetokounmpo taking that shot. Drew's out, so he would be an obvious choice, but Drew's not there. I want Chris Middleton taking that shot. Well, they didn't draw the play up for him. And they had no timeouts, by the way. So once they, had decided on this is the play, that's where they had to go. Get Middleton in the corner. He's covered. You had 2 defenders between Giannis at the top of the key going the wrong way and Middleton in the corner, so a pass may not have even been possible. I don't want Giannis taking a jump shot. If there were 6 seconds left, maybe a drive and a kick for Middleton or to Bryn Forbes or even a Dante DiVincenzo. I don't care. And someone's going to criticize me and say, well, Mike, he's the MVP. And you're right. He's the highest paid player in the history of the NBA. You're right. You're paying that guy to win you basketball games. But again, I'm not paying Giannis to hit jumpers right now. Giannis can't hit jumpers. And I'm not mad about a loss in February. The Bucks are just going to keep figuring this new makeup of a roster out. I'm not mad about the loss. I'm mad about the comment from Booker. I'm mad about the fact that everybody knows that right now Giannis can't shoot. That Giannis is not a good jump shooter. And if you can force Giannis, you can get two guys with him going away from the basket. It's going to benefit you. It's going to hurt the Milwaukee Bucks. That's what bothers me. Everybody knows it, and I want Giannis to shut them up. And he can't. He can't right now. And no offseason hurt his ability to shoot 5,000 jumpers in the gym every single day because of the weird season, the COVID year. It's just frustrating to see because Giannis is so great. He had 47 and 11 or something like that. I mean, he had a monster night, his best game of the year. He had 17 free throws. 17 of 21, I think, or 17 of 24. Like, what? That's a good month. 17 makes is a good month for Giannis from the free throw line. By the way, he's shooting about 73, 74% on this road trip from the stripe. So if he can figure that game out, that would be a total bonus for a guy who lives going to the rack, getting fouled. Wish he got more calls. But lives going to the rack, getting fouled, and going to the free throw line. Like, that's the best stat I've seen. So, I don't know if the Bucks are going to make any kind of move. The trade deadline is approaching. I don't know if that's going to be something they're going to figure out what they can do. When they're at full strength, they look pretty dang good. But there's still those things that we were talking about a year ago that have not changed to this point. And that is Giannis' inability to shoot and their defense where they let everybody shoot. And those two things might be the reason they get bounced out of the Eastern Conference playoffs again. Someone said, does seeding matter for the Milwaukee Bucks? Well, eventually it does. You want an easier opponent in the first round of the playoffs. You'd rather be the 1 or the 2 seed, so you're playing the 7-8 as opposed to the 4 seed, because that 5 seed probably is pretty dang good. I mean, it's pretty common to figure out. So there's my thoughts on the Packers, my thoughts on the Bucks for this podcast. That's going to do it. Thank you so much for checking it out. I am, starting a new radio program here in Des Moines. It's on Fridays. I'm going to be streaming it on my Facebook page, on the ESPN Des Moines Facebook page. So make sure you like that. We'll put it up on Twitter as well every Friday at 4, and hopefully it will expand. Maybe on the next podcast I'll talk about that show and what my plan is for that program. But until then, I want to thank you again for checking this episode out. Don't forget, tell a friend about Wickett on Wisconsin, especially if they're a sports fan who is a big fan of the Bucks or the Packers or the Brewers. We'll get to the Pacoda number for the Brewers on the next podcast. Maybe they'll have some moves to talk about over there at third base. They made the big move for Colton Wong, which was huge defensively for the Crew. My name is Mike Wickett. This has been Wickett on Wisconsin. Until next time, as always, go Pack, go Bucks, and go Brewers. Thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin. If you have any feedback or you want to reach out to the show, you can find me on Facebook, Mike Wickett Podcasts, or you can email MikeWickettPodcasts@gmail.com. And you can find me on Instagram and Twitter @Mike Wickett. Thanks to Silverman Sound Studios for providing the music for today's show. And you can find us anywhere you find your podcasts, including Apple, Spotify, and Google Podcasts. Until next week, thanks for listening to Wickett on Wisconsin.